Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to feudal Japan. Yes, the land of samurai sakura, blossoms, and backbreaking peasant labor. You'll start your day on a rough straw mat, inside a drafty hut, woken by the sound of a rooster that definitely didn't hit snooze. The air is damp and chilly, and your joints creak as you sit up, already regretting whatever comes next. Spoiler alert, it's not a hot shower and a double shot latte. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. People all over the world. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, what time it is right now, and why are you here? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink against the morning light, trickling through the gaps in your thatched roof. There's no clock, but your internal sense of dread says it's about 4:30 a.m. Your bed is a flattened mat made of woven straw, which smells faintly of mildew, sweat, and regret. You slept in the same clothes you wore yesterday and the day before that. Not because it's trendy, but because you only own one full outfit, a coarse hemp robe tied with a faded sash. The hut is tiny, barely enough space for you, your family, a few baskets of turnips, and the occasional mouse that rustles near the grain jar. You step outside barefoot onto damp earth. Shoes. You have sandals if you're lucky. Today you're not. Your breath puffs white in the cool morning air. You inhale deeply and it smells like smoke from someone's cooking fire and the sweet tang of wet grass. Your stomach rumbles. There won't be much breakfast. Maybe a scoop of rice if the stores are decent, maybe millet if not. But you've got work to do. You head to the paddy fields before the sun has even peeked over the hills. The path is muddy and lined with smooth stones, worn from the feet of generations who walked the same miserable route. Your hands already ache just looking at the work ahead, hauling water from the stream, turning the soil with a wooden hoe, pulling weeds that don't even taste good when you're desperate. There's no such thing as a weekend. Feudal Japan didn't invent that luxury until many centuries later. And even then it wasn't for you. You're a peasant, a hayakusho. Your entire existence revolves around keeping yourself barely alive while feeding your lord more rice than you'll ever see in your own bowl. Your neighbors are already out there, some of them elderly, some of them kids, all of them just as exhausted. You nod politely, because small offenses can spiral into long-lasting grudges. And no one wants to be shunned during communal threshing season. One mainstream fact you probably didn't know: the majority of Japan's population during this period, upwards of 80%, were agricultural peasants. The romanticized samurai class made up less than 10%. You, of course, don't get a sword. You get a hoe and a sore back. Historians still argue whether the peasant class had more freedom under some daimyo compared to others. Some lords were benevolent. Others were, let's say, enthusiastic tax collectors with a fondness for corporal punishment. And just to sprinkle in a fringe tidbit, there's some evidence that in remote villages, folks used to rub garlic on their doorposts to ward off evil spirits. Or more realistically, nosy neighbors and traveling salesmen. Garlic breath can be a powerful deterrent. You try not to think about the next 12 hours. You already know how they'll go. You'll sweat through your robe, scrape your palms, chase off crows, and maybe, just maybe, see a sliver of sun between clouds if you're lucky. That's your joy quota. Someone calls your name and you snap back to reality. Time to start hauling buckets again. The fields won't water themselves. The smell of warm rice drifts from a nearby hut. But don't get your hopes up. You trudge back from the fields mid-morning, your legs caked with mud and your arms sore from balancing 2 sloshing buckets across a bamboo yoke. The sun has barely begun its climb, and yet you feel like you've aged a decade since stepping outside. Your reward for this early exertion, a half-cold bowl of rice if you're lucky, maybe with a slice of pickled radish. Breakfast is less a meal and more a placeholder to prevent fainting. And no, there's no coffee. Japan hasn't adopted that particular miracle bean yet. Green tea exists, sure, but not for you. That's a luxury reserved for monks, nobles, and the occasional merchant with a connection to Kyoto. Your tea, if any, is made from roasted barley or dried leaves steeped in boiled river water that's been strained through cloth, reused more times than you'd like to admit. As you squat on the wooden step of your hut, using 2 fingers to pick stray pebbles out of your rice, you glance around the village. Roosters strut. A child cries. Smoke from cooking fires curls lazily upward into the pale sky. The air carries the scent of ash rice and a faint note of human exhaustion. You shovel a mouthful of rice into your mouth. It's dry and sticks to the roof of your mouth like edible sandpaper. You miss miso soup, though you've only tasted it once during a festival, when a wealthier family offered free servings to the loyal laborers. That was the only day you saw tofu in real life. And speaking of real life, let's pause for a dose of historical reality. A mainstream fact, rice wasn't just food in feudal Japan, it was currency. Samurai were often paid in rice stipends, and taxes were collected in rice as well, which means that every mouthful you eat is basically state property. Try not to choke. You finish your rice slowly, hoping each bite somehow fills more space than the last. Your stomach isn't fooled. Neither is your body, which still remembers that you burned more calories hauling water than you just consumed. But no one's giving you seconds. Historians still argue whether dietary restrictions among peasants were a matter of necessity or design. Was it simple scarcity? Or did the ruling class believe a hungry workforce was a more obedient one? Either way, no one's writing recipe scrolls for millet porridge or 100 ways to pickle a turnip. Fringe tidbit of the day. In some mountain villages, people chewed pine needles. Why? Partly because they thought it kept their teeth clean, and partly because it gave their mouth something to do that wasn't complaining. You take a sip of lukewarm barley tea. It's bitter and grainy, but it washes down the rice. Your bowl is quickly wiped clean, sometimes literally wiped with your fingers, because food waste is unthinkable. There's no lounging after breakfast, no break, no breath. You stand, stretch your aching shoulders, and head straight to your next task. Maybe repairing the fence the boar knocked over, maybe bundling firewood, maybe helping mend someone else's roof if theirs fell in during last week's rain. Labor is communal like misery. You glance at the horizon. Somewhere beyond the hills, lords sip sake, samurai polish their blades, and monks chant over fragrant incense. Meanwhile, you consider whether licking the inside of your rice bowl again might yield one more grain. You're barely an hour into the day, and already the blisters forming on your palms are joining the chorus of old aches in your knees, shoulders, and spine. Welcome to the life of a feudal Japanese peasant. This isn't a temporary lifestyle, by the way. This is it. sunrise to sunset, day after day, year after year, until your body gives out. And even then, you're expected to return as a ghost and keep pulling weeds. Today's main event is tilling the fields. The earth is hard in patches, soggy in others, and laced with the occasional hidden rock that jabs your foot when you least expect it. Your tool of choice. A heavy wooden hoe, no metal tip, no ergonomic handle, just a splintered stick of suffering. You dig, drag, swing, and breathe like someone running a marathon in slow motion. There's no sense of progress. The field looks the same after 20 minutes of back-breaking labor as it did when you arrived. But you keep going because what else can you do? The rice won't plant itself. You catch a glimpse of a child working beside you, probably no older than 9, already hunched from labor. He drops his hoe for a moment to scratch a mosquito bite, and his father snaps at him in hushed tones. Even small pauses are frowned upon. The rhythm of work must go on. Your sleeves are damp with sweat. The sun is climbing. It won't be long before you're soaked through. And then the bugs will come. They always do. Gnats, flies, mosquitoes the size of beans. You don't swat them anymore. It just wastes energy. Mainstream historical fact. Time. Unlike popular depictions, peasants in feudal Japan weren't always dumb laborers. Many had deep knowledge of agriculture, irrigation, and local weather patterns. Entire communities depended on this wisdom to survive, and when crops failed, they didn't just suffer, they vanished. There's a brief break around midday, not for food, but to switch tasks. You move from tilling to bundling bundles of straw to be used as thatch later. Your fingers are raw, your back throbs, and yet you feel vaguely proud when you tie the bundles neatly. It's small, but it's something. Now let's sprinkle in one of those delightful fringe facts. Some farmers used frogs as makeshift pest control, encouraging them to breed in irrigation ditches to keep insect populations down. There's even a folk saying about a frog's hunger saving a field. They were the unofficial, unpaid heroes of rice season. You pause to wipe your brow, squinting up at the sun, which now hangs directly overhead like a cruel overseer. You haven't eaten since that meager breakfast. Your body is running on willpower, tradition, and whatever dreams you had about being born into a better caste, which, by the way, wasn't really an option. Historians still argue whether upward mobility was possible in feudal Japan. A few rare cases of peasants becoming samurai do exist, but they were exceptional, like winning the lottery. If the lottery required sword, skills a patron, and impeccable timing, suddenly a shout breaks the silence. A rider approaches down the road. The villagers straighten reflexively. You do too. You're not sure who it is yet, but you know better than to be seen slouching when someone on horseback is nearby, especially if they're wearing 2 swords. And just like that, the air thickens with tension. The rider draws closer, and now you can see the glint of metal at his hip. 2 swords, a katana, and a wakizashi. A samurai. You immediately lower your gaze, not out of humility, but self-preservation. In feudal Japan, looking a samurai in the eye without invitation could be interpreted as a challenge. And challenges have consequences. You shift your posture, straighten your back, and bow deeply as the horse clops past. Around you, everyone else does the same. The silence is nearly reverent. You're not sure if it's respect or fear, but honestly, does it matter? The samurai doesn't acknowledge you. He's too busy adjusting the folds of his fine silk kimono, a bright splash of indigo and crimson that looks absurdly out of place against the muddy backdrop of your peasant village. His sandals are polished. His horse is well fed. You, by contrast, have mud between your toes and straw in your hair. He's just passing through this time. But even that brief appearance changes the atmosphere. Everyone seems more alert, more cautious. You go back to bundling straw, but your shoulders remain tense. Because if a samurai stays, it usually means something's wrong. Tax collection, conscription, or worse. Let's ground that tension in a mainstream historical fact. Samurai had legal authority to kill commoners on the spot if they were disrespected. It was called kirisute gomen, literally authorization to cut and leave. Imagine your workplace manager having that kind of power and you're the coffee intern. Historians still argue whether samurai used this privilege frequently or rarely. Some say it was more symbolic, a deterrent, rather than a regular event. Others believe village records underreport such killings out of fear or political pressure. Either way, the fear was real, and you feel it now down to your bones. As the hoofbeats fade into the distance, people around you slowly return to motion. The unspoken rule: don't talk about the samurai unless you want to attract more of them. A little fringe tidbit for you: some peasants carried charms with tiny illustrations of fierce animals like tigers or hawks sewn into the lining of their robes. Not because they believed it would stop a sword, but because it gave them the courage to not collapse in terror when one was drawn. You finish tying off your straw bundles with slightly trembling fingers, your heart still racing, even though the danger has passed. Mostly. And as you look down at your calloused hands, you wonder for the 100th time how it came to be that someone's life was worth so much, while yours could be taken without a name or record. The worst part? You're not even angry, just tired. There's a quiet moment where the breeze shifts, and for a second the field is almost peaceful again. Birds chirp. The scent of wet earth rises. But even peace feels temporary here. You've learned not to trust moments of rest. They often mean something's about to go wrong. And so you return to work, one foot in front of the other, as the sun marches on and the weight of another long day begins to press down. The sky shifts towards dull gray as clouds begin to gather. Not the light, fluffy kind that hint at spring, but the thick, sagging ones that promise misery. You grip your hoe tighter, muttering a soft curse under your breath, barely loud enough for the wind to hear. Rain. Again. You don't have time to flee indoors. Not that indoors means much in your thatched hut, where the roof leaks and the walls are more symbolic than functional. Instead, you press on, hoping to finish today's work before the sky cracks open. Unfortunately, the sky doesn't care about your hopes. Within minutes, the downpour begins. Heavy drops slap against your shoulders, soaking through your robe in seconds. The fields quickly turn to slush, and your already blistered feet sink into muck with every step. The hoe, now slippery in your grip, swings heavier than ever. You keep going, because stopping doesn't change anything. Because soaked or not, your quota remains. A neighbor slips in the mud and curses louder than you dared. His straw hat floats off in a shallow stream forming beside the footpath. You want to laugh, but your jaw is clenched too tightly. You're not angry, just soaked sore and spectacularly unimportant. Mainstream historical fact. Japan's rainy season, called Suyu, typically falls in early summer and can last for weeks. For peasants, this meant a constant battle with rot mold and flooded paddies. If the rice drowned, so did your year. You dig a small trench to try and divert water from the base of the new seedlings. You've done this 100 times, but the rain mocks your efforts. It seems to fall harder each time you adjust your strategy. Historians still argue whether irrigation systems in feudal Japan were truly communal or enforced by local authorities under threat of punishment. While many villages maintained waterworks cooperatively, there are grim records of peasants punished for water theft, redirecting streams without permission. Then there's the fringe tidbit. Some villagers believed that whistling during storms could anger the thunder god Raijin. So you keep your mouth shut just in case, and instead listen to the squelch of your steps and the drumbeat of the storm. A few hours and the landscape has transformed. What was once a field is now a swamp. The trail back home has vanished under ankle-deep water, and the single wooden footbridge leading toward your village has begun to creak ominously. You'll still cross it, carefully. You don't have a plan B. You finally make it back to the village looking like you bathed in a rice barrel. Your robe sticks to you like seaweed, and your hands are so shriveled they look older than your grandfather. As you step into your hut, you realize, with a fresh wave of dread, that your roof has begun to leak again. A slow drip echoes inside, rhythmically falling into a cracked wooden bowl placed there for this exact reason. There's no dry robe to change into. You wring out what you're wearing and sit down near the charcoal fire pit where a tiny ember smolders. Never enough for warmth, but enough to remind you what warmth used to feel like. This is the part of the day where you're supposed to rest. But instead you patch the roof using palm-sized bits of straw rope. It's a losing battle fought nightly, like brushing your teeth with a twig against a flood. Eventually you lie down again on your straw mat, still damp. You close your eyes, listening to the rain hammering the roof and the slow dripping inside. You wonder, not for the first time, what it would be like to sleep under a proper roof on a real futon, in a home that doesn't try to dissolve in every storm. But you also know better than to dream too loudly. Raijin might be listening. The storm still hasn't passed. When morning arrives again, if you can even call it that, you didn't really sleep. You drifted in and out of a shallow haze, the kind of half-dreaming where your body rests, but your mind remains stuck between aching limbs and a leaking roof. You sit up with a grown-soaked robe clinging to your skin, hair damp and sticking to your forehead. Your joints protest as you stand. Every movement feels like lifting a sack of rocks. But guess what? The fields are calling and no one gets a sick day in your world. Especially not when there's a tax deadline coming up. The officials don't care if your paddy's flooded. The quota remains the same. You throw open the door, really just a woven mat. and greet the morning with the enthusiasm of a man stepping into battle with a spoon. The path is slick. Your sandals have disintegrated into useless straps of wet fiber. So you go barefoot again, toes squelching through the mud with each step. You're not alone. Dozens of other villagers are already outside, faces grim, expressions tight. No one bothers with greetings today. Everyone's lost something to the storm. Crops, roofs, sleep. The collective mood is as damp as the ground. And then comes the voice of your landlord's steward shouting from atop a raised wooden platform. Near the granary, he announces the arrival of tax season. Your stomach clenches. It's always rice. The officials won't accept millet or barley. It has to be rice polished and packed. Enough to feed the daimyo's soldiers and leave you wondering how you'll survive the next month. Mainstream historical fact. Peasants during the Edo period were heavily taxed, often losing up to 40% of their rice yield to local authorities. It wasn't just payment, it was survival. For those higher up the food chain, your job was to grow it clean, to pack it and give it away. You carry your offering small but polished. Every grain cleaned and dried by hand. You walk to the steward's post, bow deeply, and place your tribute in the collection basket. He doesn't look at you, just makes a chalk mark and gestures for the next in line. No words exchanged, no thanks, just transaction. Historians still argue whether these quotas were strictly enforced in remote areas or whether some local lords showed flexibility. But even when adjustments were made, they rarely benefited peasants. More often than not, leniency came only when crop failure risked larger political problems. Now, for a fringe tidbit, some desperate farmers reportedly hid small amounts of rice in hollowed-out sandals, or even beneath floorboards, hoping to preserve enough to survive the winter. It was dangerous. If caught, it could mean beatings or worse. But hunger doesn't care about legality. Once your rice is gone, the real worry begins. You look down at your now empty basket hands, still dusty with starch. You're expected to return to the fields again immediately, of course. There's no grace period after tax day, just more toil. But your body disagrees, your feverish shivering despite the humidity. Something is off. Your vision swims, and your legs feel like bamboo reeds. You crouch near the irrigation ditch, dip your hands into the water and splash your face. It doesn't help. The chill has settled deep in your chest. You cough, then again, and again. The others glance at you. No one says anything. They can tell you're sick. But sympathy has no place here. One man pats your shoulder on his way past and mutters something about ginger root tea if you can find it. Otherwise, you'll just have to ride it out. You've seen people waste away before. It's never dramatic. Just slow, quiet. Back home, you lie on your mat, breathing heavily. Your mother places a damp cloth on your forehead and offers a thin porridge made from leftover millet and wild greens. There's no medicine, no doctor, just rest and maybe prayer. The fire crackles beside you, more smoke than heat. You close your eyes. You don't expect to sleep well, but you're too tired to stay awake. And besides, tomorrow will be worse. Your cough wakes you before the sun does. It's a dry, hacking sound, that echoes in the small space of your hut, like distant thunder, unwelcome, familiar, ignored. Your mother is already up, her back turned as she stirs a pot of rice gruel over the embers. The air inside smells faintly of smoke and fermented pickles. You've smelled better, but also worse. You sit up slowly, the fever still buzzing under your skin. Your limbs feel like they've been packed in wet cloth. But you get up anyway. You have to. Because even when you're sick, you're still expected to show up. Rest is a luxury like sugar or dry shoes. Today's task is especially mindless, tying bundles of dried grass to be used for roofing fuel, or if things get really dire, food. You sit in the shade of a crooked tree with the other elders, and all of you moving slowly, methodically, in silence. The grass leaves shallow cuts on your fingers. You work anyway. Mainstream historical fact. In many feudal Japanese villages, there were no full-time doctors for commoners. Minor illnesses were treated at home using herbs, prayers, and household rituals. Only wealthier families could afford to summon a traveling physician or consult a temple healer. You chew slowly on a pickled plum to keep the nausea down. It's sour enough to wake the dead, and likely old enough to qualify as a family heirloom. Still, it helps. Historians still argue whether the mortality rate among peasant children was primarily due to disease, malnutrition, or labor injuries. In truth, it was likely all three. Most people didn't die suddenly, they faded. Quietly, like candlelight in wind. You overhear the village priest chanting near a small Shinto shrine just up the hill. There's a ritual happening today, one of many seasonal ceremonies meant to appease the local kami or spirits. You're not expected to attend, but skipping it would be noticed. So you go. You limp up the hill joints, groaning throat raw. The shrine is little more than a wooden post with paper streamers and a rope bell. The priest, an old man with trembling hands, offers prayers for the crops, the weather, and the health of the community. Everyone bows deeply. You follow suit, though your knees complain. A fringe tidbit for today. In some regions, villagers believed that illness could be caused by angry ancestors, not bacteria. Special dolls called karashiro were made from paper or straw and tossed into rivers to wash away the sickness. You saw someone do it once as a child. You never asked if it worked. The ritual ends quietly. No music, no fireworks. Just bowed heads and whispered hopes. You return to your spot beneath the tree and resume bundling straw. The afternoon heat is building now, and with it the sweat returns. Even your fever can't block it. You're startled by the sudden arrival of a young boy, maybe 10, who sprints past, shouting that a messenger has arrived from the nearby castle. That gets attention. Everyone pauses. The messenger appears a few minutes later, on horseback, soaked with sweat and impatience. He doesn't dismount, just unrolls a scroll and shouts its contents. A new tax decree. Increased rice quotas, effective immediately. You close your eyes. You don't feel angry. You feel nothing, just that deep, hollow tiredness that fills the space where outrage used to live. And so the day drags on. The sun dips lower, your hands keep moving, binding straw, knotting rope, avoiding thought. By the time night falls, you're too exhausted to eat. You curl up on your mat listening to the quiet hum of the village. The soft footsteps, the low crackle of a neighbor's fire, the occasional cough from another hut. You wish for a dreamless sleep, but dreams come anyway. You wake before dawn again, not because you want to, but because something cold and wet brushes against your foot. It's not rain this time, it's mud. The edge of your hut has given way slightly in the night, letting in a creeping ooze of slush from yesterday's runoff. You groan and drag your feet back toward the center of the room, but the mat is already soggy. You'd be amazed at how quickly discomfort becomes routine. You dress in the same robe, which now smells more like pond than person. Your stomach growls as you tie your sash. There was no dinner last night, and the rice pot is almost empty. You chew on a dried radish sliver and pretend it's filling. It's not. The clouds are clearing now, revealing a sky streaked with pink and blue. It would be beautiful if you weren't about to spend the day bent over in the sun. Today your work is planting seedlings in the paddies. The waterlogged field reflects the sky like a mirror. But don't be fooled. Step into it and the muck grabs your feet like a jealous spirit. You shuffle forward inch by inch, pressing delicate rice shoots into the mud. Your back begins to ache by the third row. Mainstream historical fact. Rice transplanting was a vital step in ensuring healthy crops, often done entirely by hand, row after row. Entire villages would turn out to help with the work, divided among families. It was slow, precise, and required immense stamina. You pause to stretch, wincing as your spine protests. Your fingers are coated in mud, your knees submerged, and your robe clings to your body in all the worst ways. Around you, others move in silence, focused, methodical. It's almost meditative if meditation involved constant pain and a low risk of leech bites. Suddenly, one of the younger workers yelps and slaps at their leg. A leech. You try not to think about it as something wriggles past your ankle. Let's toss in a fringe tidbit. Some villagers believed certain swamp insects were messengers from the underworld. Killing them was considered unlucky, so they'd shoo them away gently, while still swearing under their breath. You adopt the same strategy. You're not superstitious, but you also don't want to test the kami. By midday, your legs are numb and your stomach is hollow. A short break is called and you slump on the grass near the edge of the paddies, wiping mud from your face with a sleeve that just makes it worse. Someone shares a few bites of cold millet with you. It tastes like paper, but it's something. Historians still argue whether these communal labor systems empowered peasants by giving them collective voice or simply ensured that their labor could be controlled more efficiently. Either way, you're definitely not feeling powerful right now. A light breeze stirs the water as you return to planting. Your rhythm returns: step, press, smooth, repeat. Your shadow stretches longer behind you. The sky shifts from brilliant blue to hazy amber. The light plays across the water, turning the whole paddy into a liquid mirror. You try not to slip. The quiet is broken by the distant sound of a flute, probably a child playing with a reed again. The sound floats above the paddies, oddly soothing. Even here, even now, there are moments of calm, of beauty even. But that doesn't change the soreness in your muscles, or the fact that tonight you'll sleep in a wet hut with a half-empty stomach. You finish the final row just as the light disappears. Your hands are trembling. You trudge home barefoot, sandals long since abandoned, each step squelching. Back in your hut, your mother has managed to cook a bit of porridge, using wild greens and the dregs of a rice pot. You eat it slowly, savoring each bitter bite. Outside, the frogs begin to sing, a whole chorus of them, chirping and croaking into the night. Some say it means good luck. Others just say it means rain is coming again. You lie down too tired to undress and stare at the ceiling where fireflies blink in and out through gaps in the thatch. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. The air is heavy the next morning, thicker than usual, humming with that familiar tension that settles in before a storm, or something worse. The village elder calls an impromptu gathering in the central clearing, and you drag yourself from the patty's sweat already soaking your collar despite the early hour. Everyone shows up, even the elders who can barely walk, even the kids who usually sneak off to chase frogs. That alone tells you this is serious. The elder's face is grim as he raises one hand for quiet. You already know the news will be bad. No one calls a meeting to distribute good fortune. A landslide hit one of the terraced fields on the northern slope. Half the rice seedlings were washed away. No one was hurt, but the yield for that area is gone, which means everyone else will have to make up for it or the village won't meet the Lord's quota. There's no protest, just silence. That exhausted collective silence that says, of course. Why not mainstream historical fact? Feudal Japan was prone to natural disasters, earthquakes, floods, typhoons, and landslides were common. Agricultural communities were especially vulnerable, as a single bad season could mean starvation or severe punishment from above. You're assigned to a repair team. The path to the damaged field is steep, narrow, and now half buried in mud. You carry shovels, ropes, and woven baskets. There's no protective gear, just determination and desperation. The scene at the landslide is worse than expected. A whole section of earth has collapsed like a fallen cake. The water channel is broken, seedlings crushed or swept away. You dig alongside others, clearing rocks and reinforcing the embankment with packed earth and wooden supports. Your hands bleed through the rope, but you keep tying. Historians still argue whether peasant communities had true autonomy in handling these disasters, or if every response was dictated by the local magistrates. In your case, autonomy means doing everything yourself and hoping no one from the castle notices the delay. By midday, the sun burns through the humidity, and your robe clings to your back like wet parchment. You take turns passing around a shared gourd of water, thick with clay from the rim. You try not to drink too quickly. It's the only jug, and the spring is still a long walk downhill. Now for today's fringe tidbit. In some mountain villages, people tied bells to their belts while working near slopes, believing the sound would appease mountain spirits or at least scare off monkeys. Either way, you think they had the right idea. You find yourself humming just in case. By late afternoon, the worst of the damage has been cleared. There's no celebration, just weary glances and slow, stiff stretches. You walk back down the slope carefully, Each step a gamble, on loose soil and sore knees. You pass by the shrine again on your way home. A new offering has appeared, a small bundle of rice tied with a red string and placed beside a stone fox statue. Someone's praying for protection. You whisper a silent agreement and keep walking. At home, your meal is sparse again. Roasted barley and a few boiled greens. You eat while sitting on your heels, watching the fire flicker low. Your hands are still shaking, your legs still sore. You think about the fields lost to mud, the rice taken for taxes, the storms, the blisters, the silent glances that carry more weight than any words. Then you think about the simple fact that you're still here, and tomorrow you will be again. Outside, the crickets begin their evening song. The wind shifts cooler now, brushing across your cheek like a sigh. You lie back on your mat and close your eyes. The sound of the day's shovels echoing faintly in your bones. Your roof groans in the night. Not from the rain this time, but from the wind, sharp and fast, slicing through the village like a silent blade. You don't sleep much again. Every time you start to drift off, a new gust rattles the thatch above, and you half expect the whole thing to lift off like a poorly made kite. When morning comes, it's with that strange golden stillness that follows a rough wind. The trees have dropped half their leaves, and someone's chicken is wandering loose across the road looking dazed. You gather your things, rope bucket, short-handled sickle, and head to the outskirts of the village. Today's task is helping repair the roof of a neighbor's hut that nearly tore clean off during the storm. The roof is little more than woven grass, tied together with vine and hope. You climb a bamboo ladder and begin the slow, precarious work of laying bundles of new thatch. Each bundle must be tied tightly, overlapped like fish scales, angled just right to shed water. It's a craft, but also a curse, because you've done this before and you know it never holds for long. Mainstream historical fact. Thatched roofs, or kayabuki, were common among peasant homes in feudal Japan. They required regular maintenance, often replaced once every few years and always by hand. Fire was a constant risk. So was collapse. As you work, you notice the older men below watching closely, not to supervise, but because they've done this for decades and still find themselves hoping the younger generation will be luckier, faster, or at least more careful. You tie your knots tighter just to be sure. And now for your fringe fact of the day. Some villagers place tiny charms made of folded paper or fish bones into the rafters while thatching, believing these hidden tokens could ward off lightning strikes or mouse infestations. You'd laugh, but considering last week's roof leak, you're ready to try anything. Your hands grow numb by midday, and the ladder shifts alarmingly with each breeze. But you don't stop. You can't. Roofs aren't optional. Not unless you enjoy waking up soaked or with a raccoon dog in your lap. Historians still argue whether thatch work was distributed fairly among village residents or pushed onto the poorest families. In your village, there's an unspoken rule: if you help with someone else's roof today, they'll help with yours tomorrow. It's not charity. It's survival through shared suffering. By late afternoon, the job is done. The roof looks decent if you squint, and no one fell. A rare win. You climb down, hands stiff and sore, and are handed a warm drink by the homeowner, barley tea with a touch of roasted rice. It's bitter, smoky, and completely perfect. You sit for a moment cross-legged in the dust, sipping slowly. The sun is low now, casting long shadows across the village. You catch your breath and feel something close to pride, not because it's comfortable, but because it's done. As you head home, your mother meets you with a quiet nod. She's been mending an old robe near the fire, patching holes with scraps of cloth dyed from crushed berries and old ash. It's more gray than anything else now, but warmer than what you've been wearing. You thank her and pull it over your shoulders. It smells like smoke and time. That night you lie beneath your own still leaky roof, grateful at least that the wind has passed. A lantern flickers outside a neighbor's hut, casting soft amber shapes across the path. Someone sings a lullaby to a crying child, off-key but sweet. You close your eyes and exhale slowly, for now the roof is holding. Darkness falls earlier now. The season is shifting, nights lengthening, mornings colder. You wake before the sun, not from duty this time, but from something older, deeper. A stirring fear, not of war, lords, or taxes, but something harder to explain. You sit up and listen. Silence. Then a low rustling outside. You've lived in this village your whole life. You know the sounds of boars, of dogs, of your neighbor's heavy steps. But this is different. Your mother lights a tiny oil lamp. The flame dances, throwing shadows against the thin wooden wall. She whispers a single word. Yokai. Spirits. Monsters. Mischievous beings that slip between this world and the next. Whether you believe or not doesn't matter. Because tonight it feels real. You step outside cautiously. The path is empty. The wind carries the scent of burned incense and distant pine. You notice small offerings near the shrine rice sake, tiny dolls made of paper and straw. Someone's appeasing something. Mainstream historical fact. Rural communities in feudal Japan often practiced Shinto rituals at a hyper-local level. Every grove hill or oddly shaped rock might house a spirit. Shrines, some no bigger than a birdhouse, were scattered throughout the landscape, maintained by villagers and visited regularly. Back inside, your grandmother insists on lighting a charcoal ember and waving a branch of dried mugwort around the doorframe, muttering a chant that's half forgotten by modern historians, but still whispered here. You return to sleep, but uneasily. By morning, the fear has lifted, though not vanished. You begin your work as usual today, clearing overgrown paths near the bamboo grove. It's dense, shadowy, and unnervingly quiet. Your sickle clicks against fallen branches, and every so often you catch movement in your peripheral vision. Birds, foxes, or something watching fringe tidbit. One local legend speaks of a creature called the Nopepo, a blobby, faceless ghost that smells like rotting meat. It doesn't hurt anyone, but people still flee if they see it. Why, no one knows. Maybe because even the harmless things out here aren't really harmless. You don't see anything today, but you work a little faster, a little closer to the other villagers. You catch the eye of one man who nods silently toward the shrine and makes the sign of respect with both hands. You copy him. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were genuinely held or simply cultural rituals passed down out of habit. But in a world where lightning kills randomly, food disappears to rot, and taxes arrive without warning, believing in spirits almost makes more sense than believing in justice. By sunset, you're bone-tired and just a little spooked. You return home with a bundle of kindling and the unsettling feeling that something followed you back. There's no proof, just that prickly sensation on your neck. At dinner, you say nothing. Your mother leaves a tiny pinch of rice beside the door, just in case. You sleep curled beneath your patched robe, a talisman tied around your wrist by your grandmother long ago. You never asked what it meant. Tonight, you're glad it's there. Some fears aren't real. Some just wear different names. You're 16 now, or maybe 17, it's hard to tell. No one in your village celebrates birthdays with cake or candles. Time here is measured in harvests, not years. But you're told you're old enough to marry. There's no courtship, no confessions under the cherry blossoms. One morning, your mother tells you she's spoken to another family, and by evening you're sitting awkwardly beside someone you barely know sipping barley tea, while your parents negotiate your future like it's a bundle of lumber. She's quiet, polite. Her robe is neatly patched, and she keeps her eyes down. You do the same. Love isn't part of this arrangement. Survival is. And in that regard, you're a perfect match. The next day you're married. No ceremony. Just shared rice a bow to the shrine, and two families nodding in agreement. That night she moves into your hut bringing a woven basket of clothing, a small comb, and a pot of preserved plums. The hut suddenly feels smaller. Mainstream historical fact. Marriages among peasants in feudal Japan were arranged based on land labor value and community standing. Romance, if it ever arrived, came later, if it arrived at all. You and your new wife settle into a routine. She takes over cooking. You make room by the fire pit for her tools and spices. You show her where the roof leaks. She doesn't flinch. She simply nods and begins weaving a straw mat to catch the drip. You try a joke. It lands with a small smile. That's enough. Over the next few weeks, life continues. Mud rice work, sweat, but now with an extra bowl at dinner, a second robe drying in the sun. The village women start greeting you both with amused glances. It's not gossip. It's recognition. You're part of the cycle now. But not everything is so simple. Food runs tighter. The harvest was thin this year, and now there's another mouth to feed. You try to hide it, but your portions shrink. You notice your wife chewing slowly, making her bowl last longer. You do the same. Historians still argue whether marriage improved the daily lives of peasants, or simply redistributed hardship across two people instead of one. For you, it's a little of both. You feel less lonely, but more responsible. Fringe tidbit. In some regions, young couples would place a doll made of woven straw under their sleeping mat on their wedding night. It was said to absorb bad luck. Yours disintegrated in the rain a week later, but you still keep the little bundle of thread that tied it together. Your wife is skilled with herbs. She teaches you to recognize wild perilla and mugwort, to mix crushed leaves with ash and smear it on insect bites. You marvel at her knowledge. She marvels that you didn't already know. You laugh, she rolls her eyes, and for the first time it feels less like a transaction and more like partnership. One evening you both sit outside, backs against the hut, watching fireflies dance above the fields. She says nothing. Neither do you. But your hand brushes hers and she doesn't pull away. That's more than enough. Inside the lamp flickers. Outside the frogs begin their nightly chorus. Somewhere in the distance a bamboo grove sways and the breeze carries the smell of early rain. You sleep that night with someone beside you. And though your straw mat still scratches and the roof still leaks, you feel for once a little warmer. The next season arrives with more gossip than rainfall. The shrine festival is coming to Matsuri, and even though it's barely more than some drums, a few food stalls, and nervous prayers for good weather, the village is buzzing. It's one of the few times the daily grind softens even slightly. You and your wife walk together to the shrine, dressed in your best robes, which still have patches but fewer than usual. She's tied her hair up with a strip of indigo cloth, and you've managed to scrub most of the dirt from beneath your fingernails. For one night, you both look like you belong somewhere better than a rice paddy. The path to the shrine is lined with lanterns, bamboo poles, with little paper shades that flutter when someone walks past. A group of children runs ahead, giggling and kicking up dust. Your wife smiles. It's the widest smile you've seen from her yet. Mainstream historical fact. Matsuri festivals were essential parts of rural life in feudal Japan, often tied to the agricultural calendar. These events honored the local kami spirits, celebrated the harvest, and perhaps most importantly, gave people something to look forward to. There's music tonight. Someone has brought a taiko drum, and the rhythmic beat pulses through your chest. A few villagers dance awkwardly, joyfully. There's sake barely diluted passed around in ceramic cups. You drink. It burns your throat, but it's warm and sharp and makes the world feel slightly less heavy. Your wife wins a dried persimmon from a game of chance. A tiny wooden fish she hooked with a loop of string. She hands you a bite without asking. It's sweet tart and gone too fast. But beneath all the laughter, the village's unspoken rules still cling like mist. You notice who's not dancing, who stands alone, who's whispering behind their sleeve. Gossip flows faster than the river. Someone's daughter ran off to the next village. Someone's son was caught poaching deer. Someone hasn't paid their rice tax in full. You keep your mouth shut. So does your wife. Historians still argue whether rural Japanese communities were held together by mutual aid or mutual surveillance. Probably both. Being too poor or too strange could mean exile or worse, spiritual blame. If a bad harvest came, unity was prized. But so was conformity. You move toward the shrine. There's a priest you've seen before. Thin, sharp-featured hands, always stained with ink. He's preparing the offering, rice fish sake, and a sprig of sacred sakaki. People bow in turn. When it's your moment, you kneel, clap twice, and offer a silent plea, not for wealth, not even for luck, just for another year without disaster. Fringe. Tidbit. Some villagers would quietly offer bits of hair or fingernail clippings at festivals tucked into folded paper as a gift to the kami. It was a way of giving a literal piece of themselves to ensure protection. You're not that bold, but your wife leaves a tiny plum pit near the altar. You don't ask why. The night winds down. People stumble home laughing and tired. The drums slow. The lanterns flicker. You and your wife walk hand in hand through the dark, saying nothing. The only sound is your sandals scraping the path and the soft rush of wind through the pines. Back home, the village is quieter than usual. Everyone's full a little drunk, and for once not thinking about taxes or tools or roofs. You lie down on the mat together, the scent of smoke and persimmon still clinging to your sleeves. Her hand finds yours in the dark. You whisper thanks not to a lord, not to a priest, just into the night. The days grow colder now, and the sky takes on that pale, washed out hue that means winter is tiptoeing closer. Your breath fogs in the morning air, and your fingers are too stiff to tie your robe without fumbling. The fields have been harvested, the last grains dried and stored, most of it shipped off already to fulfill your quota. What's left is barely enough. With farming paused for the season, you turn to winter tasks. Today, you're repairing the tools, reshaping handles, sanding the wooden edges, binding cracked joints with twine and resin. Your wife sits nearby, darning old socks by the hearth. The quiet between you isn't awkward anymore. It's comfort. Mainstream historical fact. During the winter months in feudal Japan, agricultural work slowed, but life hardly did. Peasants focused on maintenance handcrafts and preparing food stores, drying, pickling, and fermenting anything that wouldn't survive the cold. You sort through the tool rack sickles, dulled spades warped from the rain. You find one hoe with a rotting handle and sigh. It was your father's, probably your grandfather's. You can't afford a new one, so you cut a branch from a persimmon tree and begin carving a replacement. The wood smells sweet like drying fruit. Your wife sets out jars of pickled greens and daikon to cool in the shade. The cold air helps preserve them. You help stack firewood, some from a fallen tree you hauled in last week, your hands still scratched from the branches. Inside the hut, smoke drifts lazily from the hearth. The charcoal burns low and slow, just enough to warm your toes. You both sip hot barley tea. It tastes like ash, but you pretend it's better than sake. She laughs. And yet the quiet carries a weight. There's always the risk of a harsh winter. Already the wind sounds different, sharper, hungrier. Fringe. Tidbit. In some villages, families would hang fish bones or dried crab legs above their doorways. During winter, believing the sharp edges warded off evil spirits who roamed more freely in the cold. You find a tiny crab claw near your neighbor's gate and wonder if it worked. Historians still argue whether winter festivals and ghost stories in rural Japan were designed more to instill discipline or to provide release. Likely both. Fear and festivity often went hand in hand, especially when nature turned hostile. At night, the hut is pitch black save for the embers in the hearth and the soft sound of your wife's breath as she sleeps. The wind howls through the gaps in the wall. You pull your robe tighter and toss another twig into the fire. You lie awake longer now. Not because of nightmares, though they come, but because winter always brings reflection. Who made it? Who didn't? What little you managed to keep? What next year will demand? Outside, a dog barks. Then silence. Somewhere in the hills, the cry of a night bird. Then nothing but the rustling of bamboo in the wind. You close your eyes and let the fire lull you towards sleep, your dreams warm but brief. Winter is here. You wake to snow, not a dusting, not a few polite flakes, but a full, silent blanket covering everything: roofs, trees, the road, outside your hut. The world is muffled. Still. Beautiful. In that cruel way winter has of disguising hardship as serenity. Your wife is already up, her hands red from the cold as she scoops snow into a wooden bucket. This will be your water for the day. The stream is frozen over and boiling snow is the only option. You offer to take over, but she shakes her head and nods toward the hearth. Your job is keeping the fire alive. Mainstream historical fact. In the depths of winter, many Japanese villages relied heavily on irori, sunken hearths used for cooking and heat. These fires were never allowed to go out. A cold hut wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. You pile more charcoal into the pit and coax it into a steady glow. The warmth is minimal, but it keeps your hands from going stiff. You both eat slowly leftover rice, porridge, with slivers of pickled burdock root. There's not much left in storage, and hunting is almost out of the question now. Outside the village is quiet. Most people remain indoors during snowstorms. The occasional figure trudges past, bundled in layers of hemp and straw. You step out to help your neighbor knock snow off his roof. Too much weight and it'll collapse. You balance on a ladder with a bamboo rake scraping heavy piles down in sheets. The cold numbs your face, your fingers stop bending. You breathe through your scarf, steam rising with every exhale. Fringe tidbit: some villagers would warm small stones in the fire and place them inside fabric pouches to carry around during the day like primitive hand warmers. Your wife makes one for you with an old scrap of kimono. It smells faintly of cedar. Historians still argue whether the relative isolation of winter strengthened community bonds or deepened social divisions. In your case, it does a bit of both. The village feels closer now, tighter, but also tenser. Everyone is watching their food stores shrink. Every visitor is eyed a little longer. Every borrowed tool is remembered. Later, you sit inside while your wife weaves straw sandals. She hums under her breath just enough to drown out the wind. You begin carving a small wooden spoon, not because you need it, but because your hands need purpose. The simple rhythm soothes you. As night falls, you layer old robes and curl beside the hearth. The fire pops softly, a lullaby in the cold. Your wife falls asleep first, curled like a cat beneath two worn blankets. You lie beside her, staring at the ceiling, watching your breath, fog in the air above. The roof holds. The walls creak but stand. The fire burns, and for tonight that's enough. It hasn't snowed in 2 days, but the ground remains frozen stiff, as if the earth itself has decided not to move. You wake up sore from sleeping in the same position too long. When it's this cold, rolling over feels like a betrayal of your only warm spot. Breakfast is thin today. A few leftover root vegetables boiled into a broth, so faint you can see the bottom of the bowl. You don't say anything. Neither does your wife. You both just eat in silence, chewing slowly, eyes locked on the steam curling from your bowls. You're running out of food. Everyone is. Mainstream historical fact. Famine wasn't rare in feudal Japan. Even a single failed harvest or early winter could trigger months of starvation. Villages learned to stretch rations with bark acorns or wild herbs, many of which were barely digestible, but they filled space in an empty belly. You bundle up and step outside. The wind has a knife in it today. Every gust cuts straight through your robe. The road is quiet again. It is quiet. A few villagers are out gathering firewood or checking traps. Someone has hung dried fish from the eaves of their hut. It sways in the wind like a strange salted wind chime. You're assigned to patrol the forest edge today, not for danger but for opportunity. Fallen branches, edible mushrooms. Any signs of boar? You carry a dull blade and a rope sling. You find nothing edible, just frozen silence. Still, you collect pine cones for kindling and a few long branches that could be whittled into tools. The snow creaks underfoot like dry parchment. At one point, a crow caws overhead and startles you. You almost laugh. You've forgotten what loud sounds feel like. Fringe tidbit. In some villages, when food ran critically low, people boiled straw mats to make a fibrous, gluey gruel. It didn't offer much nutrition, but it staved off hunger for a few more hours. You haven't reached that point, but you've seen others hint at it with quiet eyes. Historians still argue whether these survival methods were shared openly or hidden in shame. In lean times, people whispered solutions instead of offering them out of fear, pride, or simply the knowledge that helping one meant someone else might go without. You head back home before sunset, fingers numb despite your wife's clever stone pouch in your sleeve. She has the fire going already, and a shallow pot steaming with boiled burdock, and a scrap of dried fish from the offerings. You both pretend not to notice how little is in the pot. Pretending is easier than worrying out loud. After dinner, you mend a straw raincoat that's falling apart at the seams. The fibers crackle in your hands. Your wife knits strips of fabric together to line your sandals. There's not much conversation, just the sound of fire, wind, and effort. That night, a neighbor knocks. His wife is sick, feverish, coughing, pale. You offer what little ginger you have left and a pouch of dried herbs your wife prepared weeks ago just in case. He bows deeply, eyes damp. You feel hollow, but also steady. You helped. Even if it costs something, you return to your mat and lie awake listening to the hut creak and groan. Your wife's breathing is soft and slow beside you. You reach out and hold her hand under the blankets. It's cold, but she squeezes back. Outside, the frost thickens. Inside, you wait for spring, for warmth, for one more quiet day. Morning doesn't so much arrive as it simply replaces the night. The light is gray, indirect, filtered through a haze of cloud and breath-fogged window slats. You wake slowly, not because you're rested, but because the cold won't let you sleep anymore. Your joints crack as you sit up. Your wife is already moving, wrapping her scarf and tying back her hair. There's no discussion. It's time to join the other villagers, clearing the footpath to the next village over. Snow has blocked the narrow mountain pass that traders use. If it stays closed, there won't be salt or cloth next season. And like everything else in your life, if it needs doing, you're expected to help. You chew a small ball of cold barley for energy and set out with a dozen others, all layered in whatever rags and furs they could scavenge. Your wife walks with the women carrying a spade. You take a straw broom and an axe more for frozen branches than for snow. Mainstream historical fact. In feudal Japan, peasants were sometimes expected to maintain and repair local roads and bridges under a system known as corvée labor. Even in winter, even in blizzards, you didn't say no. Refusing could be seen as defiance. The path is worse than expected. Snow drifts up to your waist in places crusted over by ice. You swing your axe to break it apart, then sweep it clear with the broom. It's slow, bitter work. Your breath comes in sharp bursts. One man cuts his hand on frozen bamboo and wraps it quickly in his sleeve without stopping. You take turns hauling a makeshift sled loaded with firewood and stones to rebuild a collapsed footbridge. Your legs burn, your nose runs. You don't stop. No one does. Stopping means falling behind, and falling behind means suspicion. Fringe tidbit. Some villagers believed mountain passes had guardian spirits, Yama no Kami, and that these spirits would punish those who didn't show respect. People would bow or leave offerings of rice before crossing. Today, someone presses a dried plum into a crevice in the rocks, just in case. You pass a fallen tree across the trail. It takes 5 of you to shift it just enough to squeeze through. Your palms are blistered again. The rope on the sled has chafed raw into your shoulder. You keep moving, keep digging. Historians still argue whether tasks like this gave peasants a sense of ownership over their land, or simply reminded them how little of it they controlled. You're leaning toward the second theory. This isn't your road, you just clean it. As the sun dips low, the pass finally opens. You can see the valley beyond another village, another cluster of thatched roofs, another set of tired souls doing exactly what you're doing. You and your wife walk back together in the fading light, too exhausted to talk. Her cheeks are raw from the wind, her knuckles bleeding from gripping the spade. But she walks straight back, and when you reach out to take her hand, she doesn't pull away. Back home, the fire has gone out. You both kneel before it, shivering, blowing gently until the coals catch again. You warm your hands together side by side, waiting for the water to boil. Dinner is thin soup and 2 slices of dried radish. You eat slowly, grateful, silent. You're both thinking of the same thing. How long before the next storm? Later, you lie on your mat beneath layered robes. Your legs throb. Your hands twitch in your sleep. But you're warm for now. Outside, a fox howls on the ridge. Inside, your wife places one hand on your shoulder. That's the closest thing to peace you've known in weeks. The first letter arrives in spring, but you don't see it. You hear about it from a traveling merchant who stops by the village and asks casually whether the local magistrate will enforce the new law. Everyone stares at him. What new law? By the end of the day, a messenger confirms that the daimyo has issued a decree. Starting immediately, all peasants must register their tools and report their rice yields more frequently. Penalties for hoarding are doubled. The new quotas are higher even though the last harvest barely filled your own bowls. You sit at the edge of the field, holding your hoe across your knees, trying to make sense of it. You don't grow rice for profit. You grow it because it's how you survive. You give what they demand and keep what's left, which is never enough. And now they want more. Mainstream historical fact. During the Edo period, the Tokugawa shogunate and regional daimyos tightly controlled agricultural output through a system of land surveys and mandatory reporting. These policies were designed to fund the samurai class and keep the peasantry in their place productive, obedient, and poor. Back in the village, the headman gathers everyone to read the notice aloud. His voice shakes slightly as he recites the clause about penalties. Increased taxes, confiscated land, public shame. His wife looks like she's been crying. Historians still argue whether these laws were truly enforced in every village or used selectively to suppress dissent. What's clear is that the fear worked. You don't have to arrest 100 people, just one publicly. Fringe tidbit. In some regions, peasants deliberately falsified crop reports by planting decoy fields, small showy patches near roads, for inspectors, while keeping real stores hidden in distant groves. You've never seen one, but you've heard rumors from older men who speak in riddles and remember more than they share. That evening, your wife sits across from you silently, running her fingers along the rim of an empty bowl. There's no way to meet the new quota without sacrificing what little you've saved for planting. You could try fishing, but the river's half frozen. You could trap rabbits, but you're not the only one thinking that. You speak the idea out loud anyway. What if we just don't report everything? She doesn't look up. Just says quietly, then we better hide it well. And that's how your secret begins. You dig a pit under your hut, slowly, carefully, scraping away earth by the light of a lantern while your neighbors sleep. You line it with planks, wrap the rice in oilcloth, and cover it with firewood. You tell no one, not even your closest friend. The next week, the inspector arrives. He's dressed well in robes, trimmed with blue and green, and he doesn't remove his sandals before entering homes. You and your wife bow deeply, keep your eyes low, and smile when asked how the harvest looks. He leaves with his measurements. You return to the field. That night the wind shifts. You hear it sigh through the reeds, like a voice you can't quite understand. You whisper a short prayer, not for forgiveness, but for secrecy. Because survival doesn't always look honorable. Sometimes it just looks quiet. The inspector doesn't come back. That's a blessing, or a warning. You're not sure which yet. The rice pit stays untouched for now, hidden beneath the firewood, masked by routine. You've grown skilled at acting ordinary, smiling as you work, offering polite bows, chatting with neighbors about the weather and fish, as if you haven't concealed half your harvest in a hole beneath your home. Spring deepens. Shoots rise from the paddies like green needles, hopeful and trembling. The village reawakens. Children splash in the shallows. Elders sun themselves on doorsteps. And merchants begin to pass through again with sweet beans, thin cloth, and tales of distant unrest. One morning, word arrives quietly, in a whisper, passed like a hot coal. A village, 2 valleys over, had their granary seized. The daimyo's men found unreported rice, and now 3 families are gone. No one knows where. No one asks. You go home that night and sit beside the fire silent, as your wife quietly removes the oilcloth from a small bundle of rice. Just enough for dinner. Just enough to risk. Neither of you say anything about the pit, but your eyes meet longer than usual. She adds a sprig of green onion to the pot. It smells like defiance. Mainstream historical fact. Under Tokugawa, rural villages were collectively responsible for the conduct of their residents. If one person disobeyed, the punishment could extend to their neighbors. It was an effective way to prevent rebellion and encourage constant mutual surveillance. You now speak in code with those you trust. You nod more than you speak. When someone asks how your fields are doing, you say, well enough to stay busy. When they ask if your stores are holding, you say, we eat when the fire's warm. Everyone understands. Fringe tidbit. In some areas, peasants crafted false-bottomed baskets to carry food past checkpoints. Others trained birds, yes birds, to carry seeds and messages over hills. It sounds like fantasy, but you once saw a man whisper to a crow before it flew away. You never asked what he said. One day a cart passes through your village. Not a merchant this time, but a scribe. Young, thin, with a worn brush tucked behind his ear. He unrolls a scroll and begins marking names. Yours among them, you sign with a thumbprint barely glancing. You don't want to draw attention. Historians still argue whether these censuses were about population taxation or quiet intimidation. Most likely all 3. Each stroke of the brush was a reminder you exist because they permit it. That night your wife places her head against your shoulder and whispers, if they take you, I'll follow. You shake your head. No, you'll stay, you'll survive. She doesn't reply. Instead, she squeezes your hand beneath the blankets and rests her cheek against your arm as the fire flickers low. Sleep doesn't come easily anymore. Every creak of the hut feels like footsteps. Every crow's call feels like a name being carried away. Still, you close your eyes. You have to, because tomorrow the seedlings need tending, and the wind will still blow, and the pit must remain untouched unless you're starving. And if you are, you'll know how much a secret is worth. The air smells different now. Not clean, not warm, but final. You wake to find your wife already outside, kneeling in the small patch of herbs she's been nursing behind the hut. The mint is frostbitten. The garlic sprouts are thin and yellowing. She isn't tending them, just looking. You don't ask why. You know. There's nothing left in the rice pit. You used the last bundle yesterday. You boiled it into gruel so thin, it felt like drinking memory. And now there's only air beneath the firewood. You walk into the fields, because that's what you've always done. Even when there's no strength left in your legs, even when your belly is hollow, even when the work won't feed you anymore, you go anyway. Because routine is the last thing no one can take. Mainstream historical fact. Many peasant deaths in feudal Japan went unrecorded. No gravestone, no poem, just a body wrapped in cloth, returned to the earth, beside the fields they once tilled. Their names faded even from temple ledgers. You trip once on the path, your foot catches on a root, your knees slam into the dirt, and your hands shake as you try to stand again. No one sees. You're glad for that. Later, your wife brings you tea. It's hot water with a pinch of roasted barley, nothing more. But she holds the cup with both hands, and when you take it, you do too. Historians still argue whether peasants in the final years of the Edo period were more rebellious or more resigned. There were revolts, yes, but quiet despair was far more common. You understand that now. You don't want to fight, you just want to plant seeds and eat dinner and wake up again tomorrow. Fringe tidbit. Some villagers carved small wooden tokens with their family crest or initials and hid them beneath floorboards. Not for wealth, not for safety, but just in case someone someday wanted to remember they existed. You carve one that evening. Slowly. Clumsily. A crooked symbol that means nothing to anyone but you. You tie it with a string and tuck it under your mat. You and your wife sit by the fire in silence. The pot is empty. The bowl is licked clean, but your hands are still touching. She leans her head against your shoulder, and you both listen to the crackling charcoal, the last sound before sleep. The wind outside is strong. You hear it slip through the cracks in the wall. Doesn't matter now. You've kept the roof on. You've kept the fire lit. You've lived more days than you were supposed to. You lie down. Not because you're tired, but because there's nothing else left to do. You close your eyes and you sleep. And now you can let it all go. Let the weight of the straw bundle fall from your shoulders. Let the fields blur and fade, soft and golden in the evening light. Let the wind that once howled through the bamboo groves quiet to a hush, and the distant sounds of footsteps in the snow fade into stillness. There's no more rice to count, no more footsteps to follow, no more need to rise before the sun or bow to a passing rider. Your hands, once calloused and sore, are now still. Your body is no longer cold. The roof above you holds. The fire beside you flickers gently, casting soft amber light against the walls of your little home. Your wife breathes beside you, slow, even warm. The crickets sing again. The frogs return to their puddles. Even the distant foxes grow quiet. The night is long and kind. The past is far behind. You did your work. You kept your family warm. You survived longer than anyone expected. That is enough. You can rest now. And if you dream tonight, let it be of plum blossoms and hot soup and sandals that never fall apart. Let it be of laughter and warmth and rice that never runs out. Let it be peace. End of script. Sweet dreams.